Ask the Podcast Coach for January 5th, 2019.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. It means it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, the only podcast where you can get your podcast questions answered live. We are at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. If you want to jump on in, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And we've also, like I said, got a chat room at /live. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me right over there is the one and only, don't be fooled by cheap imitations, Jim Cullison from the averageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy 2019 and New Year and all those other great things. I have to admit, I showed up last weekend. I was in the chair, 15 minutes till, hey, Dave, I'm ready. And then I came over. I'm like, did we cancel? So I came over to the site, and sure enough, you were like, hey, no show this weekend. I remember you told me that I think you had some family stuff going on, but Happy New Year to you.
I got to hang out with my 94-year-old uncle who has all of his marbles. And what was really cool about that is he's 94. I mean, and that's kind of, we got a big chunk of my mom's side of the family that I had not seen in forever. And the weirdest part of that was my cousin Becky opened the door. Oh, wait, it's not my cousin Becky. It's her daughter who looks just like my cousin Becky. And then my cousin Lori walked in and I'm like, oh, no, it's not. That's her daughter, Allie. And I was like, the whole thing was like, wow, you look just like your parents. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, he was 94. So we all kind of thought, you're getting up there. And I loved it because my grandpa died when I was 3. And he basically assumed the role of grandpa. And he used to drive every year from Columbus, Ohio, which is, I think, 2 hours from Akron. It's either 2 or 4. Yeah, Columbus is 2, Cincinnati is 4. And I got a chance to say thank you for doing that because he had 3 little girls. That I can't imagine getting up on Christmas, doing Christmas. Everybody pack up your stuff, get in the car. We're driving 2 hours to go to grandma's. I'd be like, no, we're not. So that was really fun. How was your New Year's, man?
It was great. The family's been here. We have partied literally every day. In fact, on New Year's Eve, I kind of had this thought. I was like, I don't know if I can drink anymore. I mean, I just I've had enough. We started Christmas Eve. My son came in from California and we started Christmas Eve, and it just seemed like it was every single day. I took the whole break off, which was really nice. Didn't go back to work until the 2nd. So really well. I got some new gadgets too. Got a new Apple Watch that came in. Not sure if that's podcasting related or not, but it's super cool. It's super cool. And then right down here, the Xbox came in as well. So I got some
toys.
New things. Yeah, I got some new toys. I worked on modding my original Xbox. This is the original Xbox from 2001. So I've been working on those kinds of things. So not a lot of podcasting stuff, but I have thought a lot about what, maybe we could talk a little bit about this when in 2019, what kind of things. We didn't do a prediction show this year, which is give or take. We can do it not, but super interested in now knowing where we're at today, what kind of things differently do you think we should do in 2019? Or is it kind of going to be status quo, do the same thing?
One of the things I'm doing is it's a simple phrase, is what I'm doing right now getting me closer to my goal? And I realize that I can't do that all the time because all work and no play makes you go crazy. But I for a while was this is like a guilty pleasure because it was just such a bad show. I was watching Married at First Sight. It's a really dumb show. I think it's on A&E. And I spent hours. It's one of those things I put on the background while I'm working at Libsyn. But I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I started watching podcast movement presentations because sometimes they're really good. And if they are, I'll hold off and watch those later. But sometimes they're like, okay, they're talking about a panel of such and such. So I can kind of listen to this, but it's not like, oh my gosh, I got to listen to this now. But Tom Webster did a great presentation. That's if you heard me say we're the only podcast you can get your podcast answers live. He said that was one of his things that we should all ask ourselves. This is the podcast where the only podcast where blank. And I was like, oh, that's a tough question. Because so many, it's like, well, it's a podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their journey and their struggles in their life. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot of podcasts about podcasting. And I'm like,
Well, but couldn't it be, it's the only podcast that has you?
Yeah, that's true. That was my original thought. I'm like, well, we're all unique, so you're going to get that profile. But so I'm trying to. And the other thing is, I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, and not that those shows don't have value. Those shows don't have value to me because in many cases, because of the people I hang out with, because of people at the School of Podcasting, because of my audience, a lot of the stuff I already know. And I'm like, I spent huge amounts of time in wow, the sun is going crazy here in Ohio. Huge amounts of time just listening to stuff that, and again, not that these aren't valuable, there wasn't any value to me. So I was just like, meanwhile, every time I listen to a marketing podcast, I'm like, why am I not listening to more of these? I'm taking notes. This is stuff like that. So I think that's something I'm going to be doing differently. It'll be interesting because somebody asked this morning about, how do you grow your audience? I'm like, that really hasn't changed. So,
I don't know if you have to give up, because I thought a lot about this over the break as well. Because I like you, I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting. But I listen to some other tech programs as well, and Randy's on my list, and some of those other ones. You and I listen to some similar podcasts. But I started wondering, like, do I listen too much? And I think I need to do more, just cycle them through. So for a while, maybe for a couple months, get more on the tech side or whatever I want to listen to, and then kind of come back to some of those podcasts, because we end up repeating ourselves a lot. And so every single week, sometimes some people need it. And if you need it every week, that's great. I still benefit from your School of Podcasting all the time. Now I'll be honest. There are sometimes you do some topics. I didn't want to listen to the book thing. I'm not ever going to write a book.
Right.
So I just, 30 to get to the end. But I still find myself, I do on this show as well, but I still find myself getting nuggets of things or reminders of things. This is where I don't think you want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, is that you get reminded, oh yeah, I should be doing that. Or you hear from one of your guests something new that they're doing that you think, yeah, I probably could be doing more of that, or I should think about that, or I should go home and I think I've got in 2019, I got to get more on Instagram. Like I just do. Right. And everybody's saying that, and I'm behind, and it doesn't matter, but only because I've been hearing your guests saying Instagram this and Instagram this and Instagram this. Right. And so I don't think you want to just say, well, I'm going to stop listening to podcasts. And I know you're not saying this, but I'm going to stop listening. I think those are still really valuable. And I still find, I listened to the year-end review show that you did with everybody's podcast that they like. And it's good to get refreshed on some of those too. So I would say just make a reasonable decision.
Yeah, I think, what I'm going to do is look at the title. I think a lot of times. So if I see, it's got to, catch me that like, oh, this might be something new. And then, like you said, 30, 30, 30, 30 and go that route. Because there are some things that I do listen to. Like right now I found this guy named Don Miller, because Dan Miller's 48 Days to the Work You Love. Don Miller, also in Tennessee, also part of the Nashville Mafia, does Story Brand. And I'm listening to that book, and that's really got me thinking. Like he's all about, and I love this. He's talking about a story, and he's talking about businesses. So it's a little different, but he's saying, if you're doing a business, it should either help people survive or thrive. And I was like, that's a good point. It's like, here's something to help you launch, or now that you're launched, here's how to grow. And I was like, it's an easy way. Then, in fact, I'm pretty sure that's going to be this week's episode of the School of Podcasting. I'm batting that around, but he's all about having a crystal clear, like if his thing is, if you go to somebody's website, can you tell in 3 seconds what's going on? And I was like, ooh, I need to redo my website big time. So having a crystal clear message is what I'm getting out of this book. And I was like, and it's hard because sometimes you're like I have to figure out, am I the podcast launch guy? Am I the podcast grow guy? Am I the podcast troubleshooter when your feed goes bad? It's like, well, I can do all of those, but what's the main thing I want to, and it's hard sometimes to come up with like, okay, what's the one thing that, because he goes, you can't have, it's a really interesting book. So that's kind of why I like it at this point, is it's making me do that. So.
Dave, I wouldn't underestimate the power of community though. Like, so I would consider Ask the Podcast Coach a community show. we don't, it doesn't have a focus except for podcasting. Right? And even then, sometimes we go around that. Its focus is the community. And I think sometimes the gurus, in what you said, that, okay, you got to find your purpose. Well, if we try to find our purpose here on Ask Podcast Coach and try to get a topic or something that we drilled into, I think it could be dangerous. I think us realizing that our focus is our audience, the 20 or so, 25 that come out every Saturday morning, the community that we've built around this, the group of people, and the conversation just happens to be what they listen to. And so for some people, if you've gathered a community around you and you're being successful in just talking to the community, I don't know if you have to be that focused. In fact, I think some people, we're drawn to other people. And if you're authentic and you're true and you're out there kind of just sharing your life, I think some people really like that too. So I think we underestimate that mode. And that can be a mode that's just fine. Home Gadget Geeks. Listen, there's a million tech shows out there, but there's only one Home Gadget Geeks that has the community that I have, that come out on Thursday nights or listen to it on a regular basis to hear what I have to say. Not even me, but my guests or who I have on. And it's a community show. I wouldn't say we have a laser target of being, we had 3 topics last week. We did tech. We did travel tech. We talked about the new Tesla. And what else? Now that I'm saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh, we talked about the Ring stick-up cams. 3 very diverse subjects. The point wasn't we were trying to sell anything to anybody. All the folks that listen to my show like those kinds of topics, right?
That's it.
And they're okay with that shotgun effect. So I don't know if you always have to be laser focused on one exact thing.
Yeah, and I think he was talking more about his website, but I think see, in your case, that's all awesome because it's all tech gadgety kind of stuff, and that's exactly what
we talk about. HelloFresh too, so it's more about the tech culture, just to be honest. And I think, I'm thinking through this. I haven't thought about this, but as I'm saying, it seems to be true. Dave, this show is about podcast culture, not podcasting. It's about podcast culture. And I think that's the topic. And people come, 1, because they want something to listen to, but 2, they want to talk through the culture of it. And I think that's okay. It doesn't always have to be, here's 3 steps. We haven't done a 3-step show since we began.
Oh,
thank God, by the way.
What I was trying to do for the show, I was trying to get a show up while we were off. And I was trying to find the first show that you came on.
Oh.
And I found the first, I did a lot by myself.
Really?
Oh my God, were they horrendous? Because I was literally there was nobody there. And so then I started just doing the school of podcasting. Basically, I would have a topic and I would talk about it. But I can see why you said you needed a little help. I was like, oh my, is this just, and the likes and the knows. It was from 2007. No, 2000. Wait, hold on. I'd have to go back and look. 2013, I think, is when I started. I'd have to go back and look, but I found him because I'm going through all the
sounds about right.
And I was like, "Holy cow!" But
well, you were testing live. I mean, I remember that you were testing live, and so it wasn't. It was, yeah. Well, you were testing live is what you were doing.
Exactly. Well, that was the thing. The whole point was it wasn't supposed to be real. That was part of it. As I was just like, well, nobody's here. I'm just going to do this and see if anybody shows up. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, people, I guess I should have something to say. So that was kind of fun.
Well, this morphed, right? This was an instant morph. It probably took us 2 months to find our rhythm. And then it's been once we got going, and we've tried different things, Uber Conference and Blab. I think we were on Blab at one point, weren't we?
We were on Blab. That was awesome. I actually loved I loved the Blab days. Yeah, that was awesome. But and we might still, now that I got a new computer, we might go back to Be Live TV. And then last night I was playing, because I got this new computer, and every time you think you're done loading software, you go to do something and you're like, oh, I couldn't get my camera. I don't know if this is new. I think I'm normally a square. I don't know what I show up like. No, I am a square on YouTube. But I was
you're in widescreen.
Okay.
You're in 1080p.
I don't think I was in the past. I think I was more of a square. I don't know.
I think it just depends on how you have your screen orientated on your there on your desktop.
Yeah, because I was
Anyway,
trying to make videos, and it was just like I could go 16 by 9, but the frame rate was 10 frames per second, which does not work for live video. And I looked like Max Headroom, for those of you that remember Max Headroom. And
you have a C920, right?
yeah, so basically what I ended up doing was going out to the Logitech website and downloading every program for
yeah.
And that eventually fixed that. But it was like for the longest time, I'm like, I can't do videos. I'm like, that was the whole point of getting this computer.
And Logitech's made it hard because you have to download their gaming software now that has the video stuff embedded in it.
Yeah, they do have a cool program called Logi, Logi, that's kind of like a what's the thing? The OBS software. The problem with it is there's no way to get the Logi logo out of the bottom right hand corner. And I was like, that's a deal breaker. I don't want to promote Logi. I want to promote me. So, but speaking of promoting things, I'm going to do this a little different this week because this is the first week of the month. So we always promote everybody. And I think we'll do this in bits and pieces. We're going to try again, 2019. Let's try something new. So if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, simply go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And you can be awesome like people like Josh Liston from onthebubblepodcast.com. Greg from debtshepherd.com, where he teaches financial wellness. Jonathan Bloom over at Be Great Today. You can find him at weeklyawesome.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at Horse Radio Network. Josh Rivers over at podcastingexperiments.com. Max Truscott over at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane from spybrary.com, if you're into spies and such. Carrie Bond over at keywestperspective.com/podcast. What was cool about Carrie is I think she said on her 4th episode, because she always says, I'm Carrie Bond. I'm a local photographer here in the Key West area. And she actually got a lead on her episode number 4. Now it was a bad lead, but nonetheless, just saying, hey, here's what I do. That was kind of,
you got to get some bad ones to get some good ones.
That's it. And then my buddy Ronsley over at Amplify Media. Find him at mustamplify.com. And in a minute, we'll talk about our $10 patrons. But I got a question, Jim. I see this a lot. And this is one of those where it's like, there's no rules. But what do you think is the best practice of if somebody starts a podcast, should they launch with a patron or not, with a Patreon account?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I think it's a little silly to maybe launch with, unless you've done this before in the past and you're good at this. I don't think it makes sense to launch with advertisers early on. Now, that could be an exception. If you're good at this, you've got some from your blog, whatever, but if you're brand new to this and you have 0 people coming, you don't have a mailing list, chances are you're probably not going to start with advertisers. But I don't know, if you can, you can. I wouldn't think setting up Patreon early and having it ready and then start promoting it early to have spots in your show where you talk about it. I had this guest on Thursday on Home Gadget Geeks. We got toward the end of the show and he was sensing I wasn't going to talk about HelloFresh, and he brought it up because he wanted to talk about it because he knows I talk about HelloFresh at the end of my shows, right? And so it's one of those weird things that people begin to expect things in certain places after you've done them for a while. It's just like, Dave, you changed your intro this week on the last 2 intros on School of Podcasting. You got creative. You did a Christmas one, and then you had somebody else say something, and to the music part, or it's usually you say, hit it, ladies. Yeah. Well, you said, hit it, Rachel, or whoever it was. Yeah. Well, that's a little jarring for listeners because I'm like, hey, wait a minute, where are the ladies? Yeah, I want to hear ladies. Like what? So I think when you think about Patreon, it could be a good thing to start talking about, even if you don't have any subscribers, to have a spot where you insert it into your show. I think you'd be surprised for your longtime listeners. There's a rhythm. They get used to a rhythm with you. And when you change your rhythm up, they get they start looking for it. So yeah, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Yours?
But the only thing I worry about, and I see people doing this a lot, is Patreon is a crowdfunding platform. And I see people focusing way much more on the funding and not enough on the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
That's the part that I worry about, because they're like, well, I should do this. And then I'm like, and they're literally like episode 3, and everything is about how can I get more patrons? And I'm like, okay, how can I get more crowd? Because that's the other thing. We always say every book I've ever read, like if you're doing 3% or above, you're like, oh my God, you're doing great. So that's the only thing I'm starting to see is, and again, I'm not anti-money. I just wonder sometimes, I think people are going to come in and get rich quick. And I'm like, because if you have, see, this is, we were talking about this earlier. I normally have the calculator on my taskbar, and I'm like, oh no.
You got to set that. You got to set that up. Yeah, it takes a while. Sometimes though, when you get a new computer, it's a good opportunity to get some of the old sins of the past out of the way, right? Like just let those things go. Don't put that stuff back on.
Yeah. So if we had, 70 downloads and we do 3% of that, that's 2. Wait, that can't be right. 70 times 0.03
That's right.
is 2.1.
Yeah.
So that's where you're like, and they both signed up for $1. Okay. Yay. You can go get a Mountain Dew.
Yeah. But I think the key in this is that you get used to saying these words. In other words, if you want to support me on Patreon, head out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. I say that so many times. In I think getting used to saying that or adding that to your repertoire of things that you say, the power in our broadcasting is in the consistency of our messages, in the way we say them. We make fun of, Emily has made bingo cards. By the way, maybe we should do a bingo card here coming up, Emily, just hinting on that one coming up. But the power of the bingo card was that, Dave, you and I have these sayings that we do, and people begin to expect them. Actually, they look for them. It's comforting. They want them. In this, I think coming up and practicing those kinds of things, asking for money for most people is really, really difficult, and it just takes practice. And so your Patreon pitch just needs to roll off like it's like you practiced it 100 times.
That's a really good point. It's because when you first do it, you're right. Everybody's like, if you kind of think the show is okay, we do have a Patreon. If you, kind of maybe, okay, thanks. So you might as well start practicing that so that when you do get an audience, you've actually practiced your pitch. That's something I had not thought about. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think it just needs to come off confident, right? So, I always say at the end of my shows, hey, if you want to support the show financially, we have a way to do that. Head out to Patreon. I throw the address, those kinds of things. And it just sounds like I've said it for 2 years now. And so, yeah, I think practicing some of those pieces that you are uncomfortable with, once you practice them and they become normal, then they have confidence built into them. And you don't second guess it, and you just do it. It comes off, it just rolls off, and people like that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Hey, listen, radio guys aren't good because they were born good. They're good because they say the same things all the time, right? And so they're really good at traffic and weather on the 9s here on KCRO, and you're like, wow, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, that sounds good because, my intros at Gallup are all the same. I'm Jim Collison, live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday. That cadence that I said it so many times, and so I don't think as podcasters we should underestimate the power of practice in what we do. We just, we kind of think, just roll this thing off. It'll be fine. No, I think practicing is key. You say your tagline, and I can't say it, but when you say, when you do School of Podcasting and you say, you have a
message, tackle the technology, face your fears, and flatten the learning curve, and get you on the road to podcasting in the right direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you could record that and just do a voiceover of you doing that. But I think because you do it every single week, you get good at it. And by the way, now your elevator pitch, if you ever got asked, right?
Yeah. Somebody asked me, I forget where it was at. And they're like, well, how would you describe your show? And I said, well, I help you massage your message. I help you tackle the technology, face your fears, and flatten the learning curve. And every now and then I'll get crazy and I'll go, I help you massage your message. I help you face your fears. I help you tackle the technology. I'll switch them up, which is always in my brain. I'm like, wait, which one's left? But if I was smart, I would practice them. And I put the F's at the end now. I always remember massage your message. Then that leaves tackle the technology. Now I got 2 F's left, face your fears, flatten the learning curve. And then from there, I just vamp.
Yeah. And that becomes a really natural, a real natural progression. And lots of it. So as you're talking about it, as you're out other places talking about it, stuff just kind of rolls off instead of kind of thinking, well, I kind of got this podcast that kind of does some things and maybe but when you're practiced right, you just nail it.
And then the new thing, thanks to Don Miller, if somebody asked me to describe the School of Podcasting, I used to go step-by-step tutorials, and we have a private Facebook group, and then there's live coaching. Now it's courses, coaching, and community. The 3 C's. I was like, that's easy. I think people get that. And then if they want to know more, tell me about your courses. Oh, okay. Or tell me about what's this coaching thing. Oh, well, twice a month, the nerds. So
yeah, I think you have these taglines. By the way, those taglines should be on your website somewhere too. Like they need to be written out. Yeah.
That's when I was this whole, like I said, the whole story brand thing. I'm like, okay, how can I got to make it focused. And so I don't want people, because he says, if you make people think, that's bad because they get tired of thinking. And I'm like, really? But that's his whole thing. Super simple, make it easy. And I'm like, okay. So it's not a bad message. I agree with you. I think you can go a little too far.
At the end of my shows, I've said this for 9 years. You can join us live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern at theaverageguy.tv/live. I say it the same way all the time. I want to grill that into people's brains. Like I want them to think, when is Jim live? 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern at theaverageguy.tv/live, right? So that consistency in your messaging in every single podcast. And I think if you can do it in the same spot every time, I think you have a lot of chance, because like most people are listening in the car. They're not going to write it down. They're not going to make a voicemail message. You need to drill it into their head. I think you had talked about this even just recently. You did a Facebook Live where you talked about iTunes. Was that or Apple Podcasts? I didn't watch the whole thing, but was that kind of the message? Is that, hey, like you got to take your audience someplace? That's what it was, right? You got to lead them.
It's just the case of people, more and more people. I had a guy yesterday, he's a doctor, and he said, hey, it used to be you could go to Apple Podcasts, you could type in pain management, and I would come up, and I'm not. And I'm like, okay, let's make sure he's not been removed. Oh, no, you're still here. He goes, yeah, but the search, I'm not coming up in the search. And I'm like, you and 600,000 other people are having the same problem. Then I always point out, and it's funny because now that the show's getting a little more popular, it's ruining my example. But in the past, give me a Bible. You used to be able to type in podcast rodeo show and it would not come up. Like that's the name of the show. And so that was the whole point, is that the last thing you want to say to people is find me in Apple iTunes or find me in Apple Podcast or whatever. It should be go to my website, which you should have. It's only $13 a year. And I'll show you how you can follow me, how you can subscribe to me, stalk me, whatever you want to do. Send them to your website, because I just don't think there's that. And then the other thing that I see, and I kind of like it because it makes my job easy. If I get hired by somebody, they're like, hey, I want to work with you to kind of help grow my audience. And I go to their website and there's one button and it's for Apple. And that's the other thing I put out this week. I got this from James Cridlin. 80% of Europe is on Android. And so when you send them an Apple link, it's kind of like, hey, we don't care about you. Basically. And I said, why not? Oh, that's the other thing. In Apple iTunes, the actual desktop software, there's a link. It's kind of cool where you can like share this on Twitter, share this on Facebook. And the one on Facebook kind of looks wonky. They kind of hork your artwork and things of that nature. And I said, hey, I understand why Apple does that, because they want people to, share the link so it comes back to their software. I go, but why not share the link to your website where your episode is, where you have a player, and then you have links to subscribe in both Apple and Android, or your newsletter, or whatever else your call to action is. So that to me is just low hanging fruit when I see just an Apple button, and I'm like, ugh. So, but yeah, so that was, I've been playing with videos, and that's the other thing I had to get over, was I wasn't going to do any videos because for those of you that are listening, I have nothing on my back wall right now except little pieces of glue. And I haven't hung
the pictures are gone. I'm a little sad.
The pictures are actually, I think I've showed you this before. They're actually more impressive now. They're on my back door.
Oh, look at that.
Like Miss Eileen is right above my doorknob. I accidentally punched her in the face the other day. But yeah, it is cool. I like that. So I'm just, I haven't decided exactly what I'm doing back here. I'm actually still, I have the TV, and I thought about like portable green screen, and then that's another way I can do whatever I want.
TV's tough though. You got to get the right angle for glare. You got to get it. It's got to be, I mean, almost no light. Like this thing right now, I think I've said that before. This thing, if I turn around and look at it, I can barely see it. But the camera, right? The sensors are so small. Very, very low light gets picked up. So if you're going to use TVs behind you, you've got to turn them down to almost where you can't see them. So there's some challenges there.
Well, the other thing that has me worried about that is even though it's not, it feels very permanent. Like if I'm drilling holes and putting up brackets, like that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And for some reason, I don't know if it's because I'm used to being in an apartment. I rarely have. I have a couple pictures hung up of family and stuff, but most of my walls are blank. I don't know what the deal is with that. But at any rate,
hey, don't we have some $10 subscribers too that we need to mention?
$10 surprise subrisers, yes, that we can talk about. So yes, and I did realize this. It's the way PowerPoint is doing this. Like Frank Miller, even though Frank, we still don't have your website. It's really easy to miss the people in the top because it's putting people in the kind of the header area. But Jeffrey over at Podnuts, that's PODNUTZ. Michael Delaney, newly graduated to the $10 patron. You can find him at babymountainradio.com. And I know Michael is in the chat room. If you let me know what your new website is, I will update that as well. My buddy Nick Suberling over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Sean Park over at BeYourOwnNerd.com. Barry Kessler at barrykessler.com. Jay Cleveland Payne over at morebettermedia.com. That's the other thing. People are doing new stuff. So in some cases, there are new websites and things like that got updated. And we'll talk about our $5 patrons in just a bit. So here's another fun question. Let's do this, Jim. This will be fun.
I think we had a question in the chat, though. Did you see that one?
That's the whole thing. It's kind of weird with this whole power.
Any suggestions for this was from Liquidy.
Yeah.
Any suggestions for creating a fan-based competition? Hold on, it just scrolled down on me. For creating a new album cover for my podcast.
I would use like a Facebook poll would be one way of doing it. I've seen people do this in different groups where you'll have the images there, and then in some cases, especially if they're different, like you could say like, because I think with Facebook, you're not really sure which one's going to be left or right or top or bottom, but you could say like, version 1, yellow version, or version 2, pink bird, or what was something so that people know, oh, that's the one, that's number 2, this one's number 1, and then just let them vote. The good news about that is I don't think with all other voting things, people will try to scam the system. I don't think somebody's going to be like, everybody vote for number 3. Come on.
I don't know. They get a little bent even on those things. It can go wrong. You have to run these, I think, really, really well and be very, very careful, because you can, okay, so somebody makes this image for you, and then they pour their heart and soul into it, and it loses.
That's true too. Emily has a great point. She says, if you do a poll on Facebook, you can add the photos to the options for clarity. There you go. Problem solved. So, and Michael says his second website is caregivingfordementia.com. So that's his podcast, and Baby Mountain Radio is kind of his brand. So I know he'd updated. A lot of people are doing that. Liquidy was trying to play with Divi, the WordPress theme. I decided on the first day of the year. What is that called? New Year's Day, I guess. Because I was starting to get sucked in, right, to the new shiny stuff. And I did a show with the book guy and Dave Chesson, and he's using a thing called Beaver Builder. And I really like to look at his site. I'm like, maybe I should use Beaver Builder. And I went over, it's expensive compared to other themes. And I'm like, I have Divi. I have a lifetime subscription to Divi. I'm like, I should just become a Divi guru. And I started to use it on bestpodcastinggear.com and literally had an error message. It was like, for whatever reason, they have this thing. Well, part of it is I just hate, let's see, what am I trying to say here? When it comes to the new version of WordPress, I'm not comfortable with it yet. And it seems like with Divi, I like to be able to go in and just edit the blocks. And when somehow WordPress updated to WordPress 5, the only way I could edit in Divi was they do this kind of visual thing where you're actually looking at your website and you're clicking on pictures and editing it. And every time I did that and went to hit save, I got an error message. And it was like, you need to contact your media host, which in this case was SiteGround, to which they said, can you give us a screenshot? We don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh, maybe this is the reason why I never got involved with Divi. But then I used it on another site, had no problem. So yeah, so that's the joy of Divi. It's because when I look at their websites, I figured out what they're doing, and that is with Divi, you always have this little rectangle logo in the upper left-hand corner. And I like to have I want my logo to either be big and take up the whole room or something like that. And I always wanted to have, if I do have a logo like that, I want my menu right next to it. And I could never really get that to work the way I wanted in Divi. And I went over and looked at their examples. In some of the cases, you don't have a logo in the upper left-hand corner. You have your menu at the top, and then you have a big block that is your kind of logo slash, I don't know, it's just a big picture. And then you put maybe your catchphrase over the picture. And there was a bunch of those. I'm like, that's how those look cool. I was trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, so maybe I'll go with a non-logo, add the logo later. And it just, as I started to get into this, I'm like, oh, look, I'm stomping through a learning curve. I'm like, okay. So do you got anything you're stomping through learning curve wise? That's what this is not fun.
I would say to this graphics thing that you're talking about, to this design thing, right? Not all of us are good at this.
Yeah.
And as much practice as you put in, you may burn a whole bunch of time. You might be better at creating content than you are at creating a website.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Don't like pay for it. Hire a designer.
Yeah.
Do something that will benefit. I know this is podcasting, and I know everybody wants to do it for free. But if you want really good looking stuff, there are pros who do it really, really well. They'll put really nice packages together for you. They have stuff you can put around, and the way you should set stuff up. If that's important to you, pay for it.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing that blew me away. And this is why right now I've gone too far on this. If you go to schoolofpodcasting.com, it's actually hard to find my podcast. I'm actually going against my own advice, and I will be fixing that later. But with Libsyn now, and I'm gonna double check this. I'm gonna run this test again. If you have the $20 plan, you can actually now put in a code into your player so that I can say that many plays came from that player. So if I give this player to a guest or anything like that, so I just put the code website. So I can go in an episode and see how many plays were on my website. So I did this even though I'm using Hanny's simple podcast press, smart podcast players, Pat thing. Simple podcast press is Hanny's thing. I can even have a direct link. So I put the direct link with the code into Hanny's player. Jim, I got 2,000 downloads. How many plays do you think I got on my website?
Under 100.
That is true. Keep guessing.
Under 20.
You are correct. It's last time I checked, it was I think 14.
Yeah, there's no incentive to go to a website and listen.
And that's when I was like, wait a minute, I'm freaking out over my website. And now there are people I can see that people go to like schoolofpodcasting.com/651. I can see in my pretty links that people actually do that. And that's in iTunes and Apple Podcasts. So if people click on website, that's the link. So I can see they are doing that. But in terms of actually listening on the website, I was like, and that's why I want to do it again. Because there's a part of me that goes, oh, that can't be right. That's seriously, wow. Well, what percentage, what's 14 divided by $2,000? I'm like, that can't, I'm like, you know what? It probably is right. You just think that so many people are going to your website, and I'm like,
well, but I think how you acquire your audience matters. Like, I'm not sure you're doing a lot of advertising, Dave, that's driving people to your site. If let's just use Emily, she's making this point out in the chat room.
Yeah.
So Emily writes a book, and she gets a publisher, and the publisher puts out a link in a high visibility or does a big campaign for her or whatever, and sends people back to the site. That's totally different, by the way. You may see a run up. We take the Spreaker at Gallup. We take the Spreaker embed and we put it on our Gallup.com site to hit the plays. I get a good number of plays off our Gallup.com because of the way we advertise and the organic growth of and development of our listeners. So Dave, there may be a difference. I would hesitate on taking one example being you and maybe drawing a conclusion that we don't get any traffic on our sites. I'm the same way. I don't do any advertising for my site, so I don't get any plays on it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't care about your player that's there.
Well, and that's a good point, because I'm sure Glenn the Geek, probably different story.
Yeah, because he has advertisers who they're incented to send people back to the site or whatever. And, for the average person, if they're coming in off a link and they see a player, they may click play. And they don't know. Now, if they look at the player in the show, it says an hour and 45 minutes. The odds of them clicking play are going to just plummet. Right? Yeah. If it says 3 minutes, well, okay, there's some information here on a 3-minute show. You may have a better chance of doing that. So all of those things, I think you've got to walk through who you're, and we've talked about this, your avatar, your listener, right? You got to get into your listener's shoes and start thinking, like, what are all the different ways that they're landing here? And then 2, how am I encouraging them, or where am I encouraging them to show up? If all your advertising is for podcast players and you're driving people to subscribe, well, maybe spending that much time on the site's not as important as some of the other ways. But if you're getting organic growth, you got great SEO and people are coming back to your site, I think you need to pay attention to that player.
Yeah. The Ron in the chat room says, how many listeners turn into subscribers? Boy, that's a great question.
It's a super good question.
And I don't know what I would do. There's so many ways to do this. I think this is where I would go into Podcast Connect and get the percentage, because obviously that's just Apple people, but it does show how many are subscribed. So I would take the percentage. So let's say, I don't know, 80% of my audience on Apple is subscribed. Well, if I had 2,000 downloads, I would take 80% of that and say that 1,600, which is about right. Because I can go into my Libsyn stats and see how many people are using my feed. Now, that's not always subscribers, because there are places like, that's player.fm and all these other sites that are using my feed. But what I did, how are we doing on time? Good. What I did, there's actually a video that I put in the Patreon group. And because I was kind of like, I always say, don't obsess over your stats, but I do at the beginning and the end of the year, take your pick which side of the fence you're on. I like to go in and do a deep dive to see what was working, what did. And I was like, I got to find a way to figure out, is my audience growing? Because it gets really hard, because I can see that in theory, the January shows who have had 11 months to sit there and get clicked on have more downloads. Well, then it doesn't. So I said, okay, let's take the total number of downloads divided by the total number of days it's been out. Well, that doesn't work, because a show in December has been out 4 days and got a ton of downloads. And I'm like, So I was like, how do you figure out? So what I did is, people always say for advertisers that we quote the, total number of downloads after 30 days. So I went in and I took the first episode. I could have done 52, but I did one a month. I did the first episode of every month. And I went into my Libsyn stats and said, show me how many downloads I got from, I think I did 7 days and then 30 days or something like that. But I went 7, because to me, 7, those are subscribers. People that download in the first 7 days, pretty good chance a lot of those are subscribers. And I did, and by the comparing January to December, the show went up 30%. So I was pretty happy. I was like, all right, I'm cool with that. But what the thing was really interesting is I had on my graph the total number of downloads for the episodes. So you saw where the 7-day graph went up as the months went up, and then I did how many downloads we had after 30 days, and that graph went up as the month went on. I expected the total number of downloads to decrease, because as we got to October, November, December, the total number, now I'm comparing shows that have been out 11 months to shows that have been out, 3. And yet on Ask the Podcast Coach, the number stayed flat, which was, to me, promising, because that was like, wow, we're actually getting more downloads now per episode. That those numbers should be going down, but it actually about, I don't know, August, September, all of a sudden it started getting flat. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And that to me again shows growth. And I think the growth did come towards the end of the year. I had people that would come up and they say, "Oh, I love your show." I'm like, "Oh, great." And they're like, "So what do you like about it?" "Oh, you and Jim." And I'm thinking, "Oh, they're talking about Ask the Podcast Coach." So that was kind of cool.
Well, I think I told you I've been getting more emails from people who say, "I listened to you and Dave on Ask the Podcast Coach." And that is, I mean, to me, that's a big mark that in the fall we had some growth and we got more subscribers and because I was hearing from people more. And so, they took the effort. They took the effort to find me. It's not super easy to find out how to contact me off Ask the Podcast Coach. I don't talk about my email address a lot. I don't promote. I mean, I promote my stuff a little bit here, but somehow they track me down. So those kinds of things I think are really important. I think I would agree. You know who else is important though is the rest of our awesome.
You're really good at that.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I got it. And we left off at our $5.
I think so. 5 and below, right? Is what's next.
So here's the problem is now I got to keep switching back between screens.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe I should let you lead into that.
That's good. That's excellent, actually. So we've been saying the name a lot. Aliquity. You can find her at Travel Gluten Free, and that is wrong. I'm going to fix that right now here live on the podcast because I said.
Can you do that? You're not going to create a singularity, will you? If you're trying to fix a PowerPoint live.
Stop, because it's not. Well, she's just getting tons of promotion here. It's not travelglutenfree.com because doggone it almost rhymes. It's travel gluten free. Now I got to go back to you. Are we still sharing? We're sharing.
We are, yeah.
So yes. So thank you, Aliquity. Corey Finneran from ivenv.com. Jason over at CUATX. Jeremy Dennis over at Transmissions with an S, transmissionspodcast.com. Some guy named Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Joe Salsihigh from stackingbenjamins.com. Joe Taylor on faithedge.com. Kim Slusher over at distractedlifepodcast.com. Michael Ray. We haven't heard from Michael in a while.
Michael, come back.
Yes. Master Cauldron at cauldronscript.com. Rob Griffiths over at bedtime.fm. If you go to /storytime or /peace out, you can find his shows. Troy Heinrichs at blacklistexposed.com. Kyle Bondo over at GagglePod. Matthew at scottishpodcast.com. Chris Holyfield at iamsaltlake.com. And Aliquity, it turns out, in my last episode at schoolofpodcasting.com /651, she was like, "Oh, I love Meet the Holyfields." And I was like, "I've never heard of this show." And it's Chris and his wife. And I was like, "Oh, that's the I Am Salt Lake guy." Ed Ryan over at Podcasting for Radio Dummies. Ross Brand at livestreamuniverse.com. Ryan Jackson at My Perfect Podcast, which I believe is coming out sometime in 2019. Ryan got a new job, and he's like, might not be making that podcast, or it's coming out slower than he thought. Adam over at Odd Dad Out podcast.com. Anthony over at Route 66, so Route66podcast.com. Audio Dice Network, you can find them at audiodice.net. Barb at anchor.fm /BarbTUSA. Brandon Schultz at Seahawkerspodcast.com. Are they in the playoffs?
They are. Yes, they are.
Here we go.
Tomorrow.
So Brandon's having a good day. David Wilson at Ottawa Works. Dan Lefebvre at based on a true story podcast.com. That is based on a true story podcast.com. Diane Lane at DianeLaneMassage.com. The one and only Emily Prokop from the story behind podcast.com.
So great.
I'm waiting because she does Hate to Wait with John Buchanan, and John has commissioned her to do some sort of jingle for Wednesdays. It's something good happened on Wednesday. I forget what the name of it is. It's much more catchier than that. Eric over at unstructured.podbean.com. Garrett over at utrmedia.org. Gary and Margaret. That's if you put them together. They're Garrett. Beekeepingpodcast.com. Craig at ingleaspodcast.com. Chris and Brandon over at floridafocus.podcast.libsyn.com. The International Latin Podcast Awards, you can find that at latinpodcastawards.com. James H. Carter II, you can find him at creepykingdom.com. Jason over at TV times 3, that is THREE. And Jim, if this was you, would you buy both those names for that?
Totally.
Yeah, I'd buy TV Times, the number 3, and then TV Times, THREE.com. Jay over at potstirpodcast.com. John M., I need your website there, buddy. Lucas over at triangletactical.net. Mike Moody and Mike, let me know if this is right, because he updated his podcast, lowcutpod.com. It's a podcast about the art of podcasting, a podcast about podcasting.
What? Who would do something silly like that?
Paul over at fightingthroughpodcast.co.uk. It's a great podcast where he uses his dad's memories from World War II. Patrick Keller, super nice guy, by the way, at bigseancepodcast.com. Randall Blackett, he's creative, randallblack.com. Mark, we just mentioned having somebody design your website, resourcefuldesigner.com. I should at least ask how much it would cost, just so, you know.
I think it's more reasonable than you think.
Because I'm always thinking thousands of dollars. And I'm like,
it can be, but I think it can be hundreds of dollars too.
Yeah. Sean over at Clarinet. So if you know any clarinet players, send them over there. Wayne Henderson from mediavoiceovers.com, and Cody Sison, the one and only Cody Sison. He must be doing the thing where you make your own pledge. I didn't know you could do this. Is now pledged $4.
Nice.
I was like, I didn't know you could do that. So again, thanks to all our awesome supporters. If you go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, you can have your name read on the show. Now, we only do the first week of the month. We do everybody. Otherwise, it's just a certain level. So,
hey, live audience, what do you think of us splitting that across the show instead of doing it all at once in the middle of the show? Just maybe we get some live feedback on it.
Yeah, because I was kind of like, because I noticed, and the reason I got that idea is No Agenda has a huge list at noagendashow.com. And I've noticed now they do 2 segments, and they're both still very long, but those guys are just raking in. They are the kings. It's Adam Curry, John C. Dvorak, noagendashow.com. And these are the guys that if you end up giving them, they keep track of how much you donate. And when you get to $1,000, you get a ring and you become a knight of the No Agenda Roundtable.
Did we get Jason Bryant in there? Did you mention, is he in the list? I didn't. I tuned out. I should have been listening to every single name, but I didn't.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because here's the thing. I went in today to look at alerts, and there were only a few people have left, which is understandable. I don't expect you to stick around forever. And some people have come in, and my spider senses said, this isn't everything. Because I remember as this was going on, normally I would be updating the PowerPoint the minute I see anything. Yeah. And one of the things that really freaked me out this morning is I thought the PowerPoint was in OneDrive, so I could pick it up from any podcast or any computer, and it's not. It's saved locally, which I've now fixed, because I'm like, when I did that, I was like, wait a minute. If this was saved locally, that means this is a really good chance that this is maybe not the latest version of the PowerPoint. So if I missed your name, because I believe when you said that, hold on, let me.
Well, Jason, Dave's looking. Jason, thank you for.
Yes,
he's like a super subscriber, because he not only financially supports the show, but comes out on Saturday mornings to join us.
MattTalkOnline.com is Jason's, and Dave is pulling up things in the background, and
the man with some of the greatest sports pipes.
Oh, well, we talked earlier about, he's right there. I don't know. He's a 5 supporter.
It's very possible he just didn't hear it. So we split it up. So now he got, because he said that in the chat room, he got an extra 2 minutes of promotion. Nice job, Jason.
Yes, Ryan's, that's how you do it. Ryan says he likes us breaking it up. So there you go. Can I set up a crawl at the bottom of the show? That would be
that's actually a good idea.
Like ESPN. I wonder how you could do that. I that's something else that I want to
but OBS, or I'm sure any of those you could set up a graphic that scrolls.
Because I was playing with OBS last night. The original, I had OBS Lite, and then I downloaded the original OBS. That is definitely not as user friendly, and it took me. And that's when I figured out that I had to download because I could not get a wide image from my camera, and I had to download all the new drivers and all the joys of
You asked me early in the show if there was something I needed to power through in 2019, and
Yes.
OBS or these kinds of programs. I think this is going to have to be the year I make that move. I've been putting it off way too long. Google's going to change some things at work. I'm going to need to change some things. It's as different as it's ever been. So I think my answer to you would be I'm going to have to get video software going.
Well, I was playing with it and they're like, "Oh, are you setting this up for streaming?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then, oh, there you go.
There you go.
Comes through.
Thank you, chat room.
That would actually be cool. It could just go across the bottom for the whole show.
I think we'd still read them. Kim says she wants the names read, not on a crawl. And
because the audio people.
Yeah. No, right. I think you still read them, but it would be interesting to have those going, or annoying. It could be annoying too. Some people could really be turned off by having just constant names going across the bottom.
But OBS says, "Are you streaming?" It's like, "Yeah, click here." And I said, "Oh, I'm going to be using YouTube." And it's like, cool. And it takes me to a page, and because it's looking for my something URL. And the page it took me to it had one URL and they were not named the same thing. And I'm like, somebody's missing. You could connect those dots. But yeah, so I'm sure it's super easy once you get the right thing and you go, "Oh no, over here it's called the streaming URL. YouTube calls it the live URL or something like that." So it's going to be one of those little things where I have to connect a dot. I started to ask you a question as a fun little game we could play. And it's guess. We'll see. We'll play it like Name That Tune.
Okay.
This is from Jason Epperson. "I'm having an issue with my interface at the moment. It's my UMC 202 HD. I believe that is a Behringer USB device. I'm getting nothing out of it. The power light is on. The phantom power light is on, but no signal on the channels. If I unplug and plug it back in, I get signal lights to flicker for a half a second, and then they go out. I'm on a Mac running Audition. Any troubleshooting ideas?"
I think their monitor's plugged into the wrong input. In other words, because it sounds like it's getting power and sound, but it just sounds like they're not hearing it. And I would troubleshoot, one, make sure whatever I'm listening on with earbuds or headphones or whatever, make sure that you have those inputted into the right output, because that's a super easy thing to do. To think, I see this to people all the time. They plug it into the back of the mic instead of plugging it into the mixer or whatever, and like, I don't hear anything. It's like, because it's not set on the right thing to hear it on. So make sure your settings are
right path, because we've always said this: start from the beginning. If you have a different mic, plug in a different mic, and then you're mentioning the cable. In this case, that's what it was. It was a bad mic cable. So anytime you do any kind of troubleshooting, if you can somehow swap something out and try this, because I actually when I plugged in my computer, they have I have some big shot, slightly smart pants video card in this thing. And so I saw at the bottom on the back of the thing, they have 2 extra HDMI ports, which I'm not sure what they're for, if they're not for video, but okay. So I plug it in my monitor, and I'm like, "Oh crap, I waited. I hope this thing's still under warranty. I can't get the monitor to come on." And then I finally said, "Let me go check the video card." And sure enough, right there on the video card, there's 4. I could have 4 monitors. I'm like, "Oh, now this could be fun." Plugged it in and it worked. And so sometimes it's just a matter of going back to the basics and like, okay, let's make sure the mic switch is on if you're on a mic or things like that. So,
yeah, always double check your output. You know, it is one of those kinds of things. You plug it in, you get excited, then you start freaking out, and you're like, "I can't hear anything." This morning, you and I had that issue. Your settings you'd been doing some work, and your Hangout settings were set to something different. I could hear you, you couldn't hear me. You reset it, and it was just fine. So sometimes I always think of audio like a stream of water, and always start upstream and check every single process going down till you get to the end, including what the outputs are. So there you go. I think we're at our time today, Dave. What do you think? First webcast of or first podcast of 2019. What do you think? Congratulations, we made it to 2019. Pretty cool. Congratulations.
That is true. And Jim, anything coming up on the?
Yeah, I snuck that out in the middle of the show, but we had Paul Braren on Home Gadget Geeks. We talked a little about its new Tesla 3. If you've been on the fence about Tesla and their cars, you might want to tune in. It's towards the end of the show, but I'm almost ready to buy a Tesla, Dave. I just,
Really?
homegadgetgeeks.com. It's out there. Well, it's not yet. He actually showed his address on the video, and I've had to go in and blur it out in a couple of different places. So it's not there yet, but it will be. TheAverageGuy.tv if you want to see it.
I think on the School of Podcasting, I have a couple different things, which is one of the things is a plan for me in 2019 is I want to have a couple in the can. That's when I get a couple in the can, I'm like, because I don't promote what's coming up in the next episode because most of the time I don't know. And I'm on the fence. I kind of want to do like a best practices or frequently asked questions show. I haven't done one of those in a while. I have to go back and look at my last frequently asked question show because I don't want to answer the same question again. But just because I realized there are a lot of new podcasters, it's January, and I thought kind of one geared towards the newbies a little bit, knowing that not everybody in a lot of my audience are not newbies. That's where I'm teetering on. I'm like, how can I make this for both audiences, the established podcaster and the newbie as well? So tune in to schoolofpodcasting.com/652 and find out what the heck I figured out on Monday. But we're here every Saturday. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live, the only podcast where you can get your podcasts questions answered live. Stick around for some post show, and I'll talk about how I almost got sued.